This is Michelle Ma interviewing Mary Margaret Carrillo on September 29th, 2023 at 12:04 p.m. for the Voices of SMU Oral History Project. This interview is being recorded on Zoom. I am in Dallas, Texas, and Ms. Carrillo is in Dallas, Texas. So to begin, could you go back and tell us your connection to SMU? So what degrees did you obtain and when did you graduate?
Sure, yes. I earned a Master's of Liberal Studies degree from the Simmons School in 2017 with a emphasis in communication. And currently I am submitting my dissertation for the doctoral degree of Liberal Studies with an expected graduation date of December 2023, just in 2 months.
Great. Thank you for elaborating. Now to go kind of even more back, can you tell us when and where you were born?
Sure. I was born in San Antonio, Texas in 1972.
Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
I grew up in San Antonio also, um, pretty much the south side of San Antonio. And my parents were economically challenged because at a very young age, they were married and probably made a combined income of about $6,000 annually. My dad was a full-time student. And um, I just didn't know that we were economically challenged because I was surrounded with lots of love and family. So I just kind of thought that was normal. And I went to different schools in San Antonio each year, kind of because of having to move to different apartments or different rental homes. But education was always so important.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Sure. I was born the oldest daughter to my young parents, and um, I have a younger sister. My parents were married until about the time I was 9 years old, and then they got divorced. And my dad remarried, and I have a brother and a sister from him and my stepmom's relationship. Um, they're younger than I am, but in my entire life, young life, um, what was normal for me was having support from my mom, my dad, and my stepmom. And so for every event, every school event, every performance, any debate club that I was at, they were all present and active.
Could you tell us a little bit about your family's ethnic roots?
Sure, yes. Both of my parents are Mexican. I just did an ancestry.com um, project or research and shared that with my family, and they were so like, I guess, excited to know that. We have always known that our family has lived in San Antonio or the San Antonio area for generations. Kind of particularly on the land that was there, really spanning from, when Texas was part of Mexico. I don't have any childhood experiences of ever going to Mexico or going to visit family in Mexico. It is really a San Antonio root space. And this ancestry.com kind of really showed, kind of a lineage of the South Texas area and North Mexico, but both of my parents are Mexican American.
Did culture or religion play a huge part in your household?
Um, yes, 1,000%. Um, our family, I'm going to talk about culture first, and then I'm going to talk about religion. So for culture, because both of my parents were from Mexican culture, which is a collectivist culture, which is a culture that, brings group together and group identity is first over and above any individual success point. I learned from a very young age that the group mattered first, and we all kind of took care of each other. And that was very evident from the beginning. as people were proud of success points, I learned really quickly that it was we are only as good and as strong as our group is. I participated in lots of traditions that were related to our culture, everything from food to music to festivals to tradition, rituals. I had strong influence from both of my grandmothers, and so they pass it down even more generational cultural traditions to me, both as a Latina, being, Latin American, and my role from a gender standpoint as well. And then religion did play a role because our families, both my mom and father's family, were raised in very predominantly Catholic. My parents directly were both raised Catholic. And then at some point when they decided to have me, they decided we're going to go seek other religions. And I was actually baptized Lutheran. And I was encouraged all through my elementary and middle school and high school life to engage with and respect other cultures. And so I was the friend that always went to church with other people. I was the person that was like, oh, my friends are Mormon and they invited me to their church. And my friends are Pentecostal. Can I go? And my parents were always like, absolutely, absolutely. And it was much more of you need to see that everyone who has a belief system values just as much as the family that you see valuing Catholicism. And so I had that benefit, and it just was significant.
Great. Thank you for sharing. So we're going to transition a little bit away from maybe like overall family things. I was wondering, what was high school like for you?
Wow. So high school was a very different space. So in ninth grade, I started at a high school that was part of the San Antonio Independent School District, which again is a very economically challenged school district. High population of Latino and Black students enrollment, and there was some struggle for me. So ninth grade, I felt very lost. It was sort of that introduction of, while I had been a really great student, ninth grade allowed me to see a lot of opportunity for student class, a lot of opportunity for people to just feel like no one's watching. And school didn't seem as valuable within that space as what I had been brought up to. So my parents actually made a very significant shift, and I moved from living with my mom to living with my dad. And he had just bought a home on the furthest of San Antonio's north side. And I went to Judson Independent School District, to Judson High School, for the last 3 years of high school, where it was a predominantly white school before I knew what that meant. And I was in a small section of people who were part of a Black and brown community. This was an introduction into advanced placement classes, into CLEP courses, into students who were in the International Baccalaureate program, into honors classes, and it really pushed me through. And there was struggle for a while, and then by my junior and senior year, I was ready, and I was in love with everything English, and I was, on the debate team, and I was in the communication classes, and friends with the theater people, and of course football. But it was a true night and day experience, and it was all about resources. It was all about, this was a school that I had the opportunity to do a summer week-long field trip at a college campus, and that would never happen had I stayed at that initial high school.
I see. Thank you for sharing. So how did you end up going to A&M Corpus Christi?
So I knew that I was going to go to college after high school. And I thought that I wanted to go into psychology. I thought, okay, I'm ready. Let's go into psychology. But um, I got married very young, and my husband was in the Navy, and we got stationed in San Diego. So I started taking some community college courses in San Diego in early childhood education. And I actually earned an associate's degree with that. And when we were relocated and stationed in Corpus Christi, I was ready to continue to earn a full undergraduate degree. And I enrolled at Texas A&M. I had no idea what I wanted to do or what area of study I wanted to pursue. But I looked at the catalog, like the printed catalog, and I just looked at the courses that were offered, and communication just came up. And so I did my last 2 years of undergraduate work with an emphasis in communication at Texas A&M Corpus, where I had the opportunity to learn about small group, large group, intercultural, intergenerational, intra and interpersonal communication, public speaking. It was amazing. I loved it.
How did you end up going to SMU, or did you take kind of a break between going to graduate school?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a mom of two kids at the time that I earned my undergraduate degree, it I knew I was not one of those students who had the opportunity to, I'm going to get an undergrad and I'm going straight into grad. I knew that the success of earning an undergraduate degree was already significant. We ended up moving again, and we moved to other places, and I lived in Colorado and then back in Dallas. And when I moved back to the DFW area in 2008, I actually applied for the first time for graduate school at TCU. And I applied for their human communication program. They only accept 40 people. And I kind of felt like, hey, I have a shot. Grad school, like how hard could that be? But I got rejected, and I got rejected hard, and I cried, and I was like, oh my gosh, graduate school is never going to be my thing. I totally failed. My daughters are going to just have to deal with me as a role model with this undergrad degree. I'll be fine. But very fortunately, that lasted for a couple of years. And then I actually came to SMU as an employee. And I was very nervous to apply for the Master's of Liberal Studies program at Simmons because of that rejection. But I did, and I was accepted, and I spent 2.5 years earning that degree. And the opportunity to focus in communication helped so much because with that program, I was able to take coursework that was related to human rights, equity, social justice, communication, humanities, and I met phenomenal faculty along the way. So that, again, I graduated in 2017 with that degree. And I don't really like the color purple because blue and red are way better anyway.
That's right. Before and like you got to SMU, did you ever have any expectations?
About SMU,
Yeah, like did you ever have any expectations of SMU before coming?
you know, I think, I mean, it was minimal. I have always been part of a higher ed family. And by that, I mean, from being a young person, one of the first things that I ever did was go to the Child Development Center on campus when my dad was at the community college. And so that to me was college, was the Community College Child Development Center. There were a couple of college trips that I had the opportunity to take, and I didn't understand that one college is very different than another college. I started later in life understanding the difference between public and private universities. And in my head, my expectation was public universities are probably more for people like me, and private universities are probably predominantly white and can only be accessible if there was a large financial investment. And I knew I wasn't white, and I knew I didn't have capacity for a large financial investment. So I was not going to think about private university at the time. I think when I learned about SMU, I knew that's a private university, and I don't know anything about what to expect at that place.
Definitely. Now I think we're going to transition more into your time at SMU.
Mhm.
So kind of to bring it back again, or maybe to restate some things. So what years did you attend SMU and why did you choose what you studied?
I enrolled in the program at Simmons in the Master's of Liberal Studies program in 2015. And it was a program that allowed me to focus on communication and allow me to be part of an interdisciplinary study with social justice and human rights. And this was at a time where I didn't even have the labels of understanding about social justice and human rights. Like I didn't know, like, what does that really mean and how does that fit with communication? What I knew was based on the course offerings for the MLS program, that was what was, attention grabbing for me. I wanted to study human development. I wanted to study ways to engage in the power of narrative and equity, education, and human rights. Those were the titles of coursework at Simmons. And I just gravitated to that. I felt like as a person who had experienced life in the military as a military spouse for so many years, living across the nation in 6 different states and 17 different homes, that I could apply my real life experience with whatever I was going to learn in this graduate program. And as a student, I just kept soaking up everything from faculty. And I was one of those students who wanted to read the faculty bio and make sure I understood a little bit about who was in front of me instructing me about this coursework and content.
That sounds really cool. Um, I feel like a lot of the questions we had were more maybe centered to an undergraduate lifestyle, but could you still tell us maybe how a day-to-day experience was you for like as a graduate student at SMU?
Sure. I was very fortunate again because I was an employee and in and a student and working and being able to meet with other people. I did know a lot about the campus. I knew a lot about the campus involvement. I knew, our team manages homecoming events and family weekends, and founders weekends, and the entire football schedule. And so I had that foundation knowledge already. What I was learning as a student was what engagement did our graduate alumni. And I learned in those courses that some people who were in the same graduate program just came to campus and our classes were like at Dallas Hall. And that was the only building that they ever stepped into at SMU. And so in their world and their mind, they had no idea that we had the Meadows Museum. They had no idea that student performances were at the Meadows College, or that you could walk around the Cox area and, watch students, as they were passing, or hear lectures through the tape lecture series. They just came to campus for the one class during the 1 week, or, once a week, and then left campus. And so I found myself as like an SMU ambassador advocate with like, oh my gosh, you guys, did y'all know this is happening? And this is what homecoming means. And, graduate students are welcome on the boulevard during any time that we have, games, and that as students, you have opportunity to see the basketball games and the football games. And I was really excited about that. So I took that as kind of a responsibility too in those classes. And to hear other people's stories like that made me really reflect on, I want to be involved. I want to be engaged. I want to know and I want to communicate opportunities for others.
Most definitely. What was your experience like as just like a student within the liberal studies department?
As a student in the liberal studies program, one of the things that I recognized right away was a tremendous respect for the professors. I felt like these professors were people who had lived experiences and lots of academic work. And I was honored to walk into those classes and hear from them. The first 3 years, I mean, the entire 3 years of my program, every time a professor had like a recommended book or a recommended podcast or a recommended YouTube clip, I want to get that. I want to know because I felt if it's important enough for them to share, it's important enough for me as a student to actually look at that. Graduate school for me was not something that was, oh, I just want to pass and get through. I felt ready and I felt like I'm aligned here for a reason and I want to capture it all. Walking into those classes, I felt a strong connection with the professors and, they would have like breakout groups and we have some small breakout groups or group projects and things. It was at the beginning, but much more closer to the end that I could see a difference between the students that were in the classes. And by that, I mean, started recognizing there were a few people that were Latina. There were a few people that were Black in my coursework, a few people that were from underrepresented communities, but not many at all. And being one of those people, and the class size is small, sometimes I was in course classes where it was 8 people, sometimes it was 20 people, 25, I think was the max that I ever was in a course for. And we're talking like 1, maybe 2, if 3 people were in that class from a underrepresented group, that was big. But I knew that initially all of those individuals in every one of those classes knew each other. And it became kind of a small group within a group of people who were achieving this or working toward their masters. So I did see a disconnect from those who had similar backgrounds to me with those who had absolutely no connection to my experience.
Kind of going off of maybe the underrepresented communities, how did you feel that like people were represented either as both a student and a staff member?
I've never had a Latina professor. I've never sat in front of a Latina at SMU before. The one professor that I had of color was Dr. Candace Bledsoe, and she was a person who was a strong advocate for equity, education, and human rights. And I was fortunate enough to take many courses with her in my master's program and some in my doctoral studies as well. But looking around at the faculty, even at Simmons, there weren't a lot of faculty that looked like me. There weren't any faculty that looked like me. And I felt it. I remember in my master's program when we have to do the feedback for the professors at the end of the semester. I took a phenomenal course about strategy, and my feedback at the end was every book and recommendation that we read or touched was there was not a single person that was a woman, and there was not a single person that was Latina. And I found myself having to kind of give that same feedback a couple of different times in a couple of different courses. It's like, I think people just don't think about it if they don't have to. I mean, there has to be like some Latina somewhere who's done some great strategy work that can be incorporated into the curriculum of a strategy course. And while I'm a student, I don't know that yet. I hope that my professor might be able to include to some degree that work. I just knew that it wasn't there.
Mhm.
And I recall also another experience at the very beginning of my doctoral work where the course conversation started with family separations at the border and, you know, kind of the time in America where the policy was that family, parents and children crossing the border were separated and put into different detention centers, and truly families were lost. And I remember just a very casual conversation with the other people that were in the room. And it was one of the first times that I heard very different perspectives about that situation than from the people in my family or my community about the atrocity of the separation of a parent and child over something so traumatic. And it seemed what seemed normal to me, what seemed an absolute, of course, this is horrific. I was hearing almost a, well, we understand perspective. In my doctoral cohort, when I started in 2018, there's 19 of us who started. I was the only Latina. And finishing, I'm the only Latina still. Many other, you know, there was a small number of women, and it's not lost on me that every single class, again, went through the entire doctoral program and never had a Latina professor. And now, as I'm about to finish, as I'm about to graduate, as I'm about to have spent 5 additional years in doctoral work, that I'm the only Latina from my cohort without a Latina professor. And on my dissertation committee, I don't have Latina representation or Latino representation at all. So it's effective.
Definitely. Do you ever think that you struggle with your identity because of these reasons?
I'm sorry, could you say it one more time?
Sorry, do you ever feel that like you ever had any kind of like struggles because of your identity or working in a predominantly white institution?
I think that there's struggle all the time. I think there's struggle in lots of different ways. You know, I mentioned the references of my space and my culture. And I felt as a student, I was bringing that in to every course that I took. Kind of started in the master's program where, you know, anytime we had the opportunity to do work outside of what was required, that the writings, the books, the authors that I would reference were always from my community, from my background. I felt as I shared that with people in the courses, my colleagues, my classmates, it was always welcome and received. It was always positively received. But there was some level also of, oh, that's nice. That's kind of a niche thing. That's your thing, Mary Margaret. You are the Latina representation. Of course, I've been asked, does this seem offensive? Or I'd like to do this, but I'm not sure. Or do you know authors who do this? Almost like I'm the reference library for all things Latino, and I can speak on behalf of my story. My story is I am not a, you know, I am not a fluent Spanish speaker. I am someone who came from San Antonio, Texas, who have parents who both today now have a degree that they earned later in life. But I don't represent everyone. And I'm shocked. I am shocked to this day that classmates in the programs, both in the master's and doctoral level, have kind of thought I did. And that is a struggle. And professors have always seemed to be more welcoming. Professors have always seemed to understand and not to place me into that space or to navigate when they see sort of the conversation within a class go in that direction. But from a professor standpoint, I too am always the person that's bringing this up. You know, how many Latina scientists can we study now? How many Latina storytellers can we incorporate into this review or assessment? Or is there Latina music that we can talk about? Or Latina leadership in higher ed? You know, who can we move into this space with? That's been a very big part of my educational journey here.
Did you ever face anything similar while you were working at SMU as like a staff member?
Yeah. I have been an employee for 8+ years at SMU, and I have been, you know, our team manages events and engagement experiences both home, here in Dallas on our campus, and regionally. So we manage alumni relations people all over the country. And in those spaces and places, other alumni, parents, friends, guests, you know, people who are at events have frequently asked me, what part of Mexico am I from, or my family? Like, but where am I really from? Seems to be a question. As I share, you know, people from San Antonio, it's like, no. But I mean, like, where are you from?
Mhm.
And that's not a question that other people who don't look like me are asked. And I'm 51 years old, and I recognize that that is not a question everyone gets asked while they're at a cocktail hour. But for whatever reason, people feel like it's okay to ask. Other times, many other times, both on campus and off campus, have I been misidentified as support staff, misidentified as someone who people want to tell that the refreshments need restocking, or that we are out of a particular item on the buffet table. And it isn't until they see a SMU branded name badge on my chest that they might even second glimpse. But that has been my lived experience.
Is there anything you think students, faculty, or administration should be doing better or like continue doing?
I think that it's multiple fronts. I think just like the students, faculty, and administration is taking a very important and solid look with the Black Unity Forum and what their commitment has been. I think every underrepresented community should anticipate a plan of action on what will be done and when it will be done, and to actually have measurables for that. It is one thing to say we will hire people who represent the student groups that are on campus, but until there's accountability, what does that really mean? And it matters that the people in leadership, and I'm talking specifically beyond Dr. Laboa, while she is phenomenal as the provost, and there is significant admiration for all that she's doing. It matters that students get to see in their class people who look like them and share lived experiences. So we need it both. We need it at senior leadership, we need it at professorship, we need it at staff, a staff network of opportunity. I know Dr. Maria Dixon Hall is doing phenomenal work in creating opportunities and building programs, but I think expanding that, securing more resources for her. We also live in the state of Texas, where diversity, equity, and inclusion have now become words that we have to be cautious to say on a higher ed campus. And I think that SMU should say those words loudly because it matters. From a student perspective, I think additional funding, additional support, additional visibility for all the things that are happening in the Office of Social Change and Intercultural Engagement. What are these student affinity programs doing? And how can we make those connections with alumni stronger? The stories need to be told. We need to hear the stories of the people who have gone through this program, this school at various times. I want to know how people in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and last year experienced life on SMU's campus as a Latina. And I know that other people want to know others.
As you reflect back on maybe your time up until now at SMU, how do you feel about everything?
I think SMU is the place that represents for me something bigger than I could have imagined. As a child, I mentioned how education was very important to family. I was instilled with a narrative that education and higher ed were going to be opportunities to unlock doors and to expose me to things that I couldn't even dream of. And I didn't understand that at the time. And it isn't until I go to high school and I'm starting to access some of those additional resources that I'm seeing a strong disconnect between the level and value of the education that I'm receiving and those of my cousins and family who are not at the same school as I am. And I'm starting to see this gap widen. One of the challenges about SMU and thinking about it is I recognize how fabulous it is. I recognize that when I dreamt of grad school, when I was an undergrad, I had no idea that I would be earning 2 degrees from SMU. And I know that with that comes a strong network of support. With that comes opportunities that I have had to engage with phenomenal speakers, phenomenal programs, amazing coursework and knowledge, new knowledge that I've gained. It also, at the same time, has shone a light on me as a Latina to make sure that these 8 years of graduate work that I have spent means that there's a responsibility that I have to take everything that I've learned, everything that I am, and continue to share that message, because it's not here and it should be blaring. We should have so many Latina stories that we don't know what to do with them. We should have so many Latina alumni that we just are like, oh my gosh, who are we going to feature this month in the newsletter? We should have so many Latina leaders and students that it shouldn't be the one. And while I speak on being a Latina at SMU, and while I speak on being a Latina in the world. It is only because I recognize the value of everyone's story and that it is not okay to say this is our one professor that's Latina and our one phenomenal Black professor and our one phenomenal Asian professor, because the world doesn't work like that. And within our groups, within our affinities, there is so much more. So my lived experience as a Mexican American from San Antonio is not the same as someone from Los Angeles. It's not the same as someone from Monterrey. And it should not be withheld to say, oh, I'm sorry, but we have already done our Latina feature for the month. And, we picked the person that's Puerto Rico from New York. And we've already done one for you guys. So, it's time to share the wealth and go back to our predominantly featured people. And I speak that knowing that other communities of color have that same space. We all share that same thing of, it is not okay to say we are it is not okay to say that, oh, it is Asian American month. And this is the time that we are going to feature the one Asian student from pick a country. And that's it. And that's all you get. Do we not understand or value or tell the stories of people who are first gen here, people who have, years of generations here? Because those stories are different and they all have value. And so that is what I've learned when I reflect about this, is not just there needs to be more Latina stories, but we need to create the space that allows all of these stories to be told. And we need to let go of, okay, did we do a story about Asian people? Did we do a story about Latinos? Did we do a story about Black people? Did we do a story from someone from the LGBTQ community? Because we live in a world of intersectionality and all of our stories matter and we need to keep telling.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing how you feel about your time at SMU with a lot of these great, I feel like, opinions. I guess ever since or after you get your PhD, what are you planning to do in the future?
So with the Doctoral of Liberal Studies degree that I'm earning, my dissertation focus is understanding the cultural educational narratives of Latinas as they pursue higher ed and the impact of decision making. So I want to know, what were the stories told to Latinas about higher ed? And how did those affect the decisions that they made on their journey toward a degree? And in that research, I interviewed 6 Latinas for in-depth hours long interviews, Latina SMU undergrad students, to hear and ask their stories. And I wanted to know, what stories were they told in elementary school about going to college? What stories were they told in middle school and high school? What were those lived experiences like? What was their journey in deciding SMU? And so much richness came from those stories. And there's such a pride point to that. And the biggest takeaway was that there's an honor for them to even have their stories told in this dissertation. Because of the limitation, I was only allowed to interview 6 people, but I had over 50 people reach out through the recruitment flyer to say, please interview me. I want to tell my story. And it was so shocking because I remember my dissertation advisors like, well, you're not sure how many people you're going to get. It's a small number. But people said, I want to be part of this. I want my story told. Nobody's ever asked me these types of questions before. and they've all graduated. And so I know that after I earn this degree, I'm going to continue the work of the power of narratives, the power of story, and the impact that they have on decision making. Everything from what programs need to be developed, what outreach efforts need to be focused on, how do we create space for the value of story? And I'm excited.
Definitely. I'm excited to see what you do in the future as well. If you could do things over again, would you still select SMU?
If I could do things over again, would I still select SMU? 1,000%. 1,000%. By far, what I have learned from the experience here, I would do it again. And I'm going to continue to share that more people need to do this. More people need to come here, see it, be part of it. I'm a strong advocate for the educational value that is here. And I think the way to make impact is to physically be there. And so I invite people and I encourage people, come share your story, share your voice, even if you're the person in the room who's the only person who looks like you, even if you're the person in the room who says, what about my people? We've got to keep saying.
I guess what is your plan for the future?
Kind of like, what am I going to be when I grow up? Well, I am very excited because I know that the work that I'm doing here is going to translate and transition. I strongly feel that I have the opportunity to publish some of these stories, and I want to do that. I want to move into the publishing space so that I can help continue to create the value of these stories. I want to strengthen my network with the Latina community. I have, through SMU's programs, had the opportunity to meet and connect with other authors of anthologies written about Latinas for Latinas, and I want to just be part of that. And I want to share every single thing that I've ever learned in the last 8 years with everybody all of the time. I will continue to serve as a mentor for other Latinas and other people who get to school or want to go to school and just have no idea of where to start. I think relationships matter, and any future work that I'm going to do is going to be based on relationships and engagement.
Is there anything that you feel I may have missed which you would like to further discuss?
I do want to share a little bit about, I do want to share a little bit more about some early education. I want to share that I mentioned, that my parents were divorced and that I have a very strong influence with my parents and my stepmom. And I've been very fortunate to have really great educators, and I didn't even know it. And so while I didn't have Latina professors or Latino professors in graduate school, I did have a lot of Latina and Latino teachers in K-12. And it mattered because that's where I saw people who, you can't be a teacher unless you have a degree. And so I was that student that wanted to know, where did you go to college and how did you get there? And I was a interviewer before I knew what that meant. And I would ask my fourth grade teacher, where is this A&M College Station that you have your diploma here hanging on the wall? How far is that from San Antonio? And do you take teacher classes all the time? Like, how does that work? And that made a big impact. The stories of how they got there, how they decided what they wanted to do. It mattered. That's what I'd like to share.
That was really good. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with me today.